Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, so yes, thank you so much for listening. My guest today is going to tell us a bit about how she helped navigate her children through grieving the loss of a grandparent. So if you'd like to just tell us some about that story, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Oh, it's funny because you never know where to start. And one thing that you just said is, helped her children through the loss of a grandparent, and it made me realize, well, did I really? Right? Did I really? So you step back and you say, what are the things that you did that you hope helped them through it? So in my case, it was my father-in-law. And my kids were all girls, 2, 4, and 6 years old. So the 6-year-old was the only one really able to understand that Pop-Up was sick and wasn't getting out of bed and he couldn't come visit anymore. And I called a relative who has a medical background and asked advice. Well, do I tell her that he's not going to make it? Yes, it's considered important to prepare children that are able to understand something, that perhaps the doctors can't help Pop-Up any more than they already have, and his heart's going to stop working, and then he's going to die. So we did all that. We did our best. What was particularly hard in a couple of scenarios is my husband is an only child, and his dad was his best man at our wedding. They were besties in that regard. And it was a very rough time for him as well. Compounded with, we never had outside family babysitters, pretty much except my in-laws, for 6 years. So then we had to add that to the mix in order for my husband to be able to spend time with his father, because he was the stay-at-home parent and I was the breadwinner. And so all through this, I was still needing to go to work, and I didn't have a boss who was understanding of the situation. So it was the ultimate juggling act. I remember being in San Diego and calling my father-in-law, and when he first told me that he had already lost a lot of weight and wasn't doing well, and they finally found a mass. And that was his way of telling the daughter-in-law, not his son, what was coming. So I actually sat in a patio restaurant overlooking the Navy base in San Diego, which just coincidentally happened to be where my father-in-law was based as a young man, and just sat there and prayed. And I said, dear God, how am I going to get my husband and these kids through, let alone the illness, through to the loss, through to any kind of recovery, and help my mother-in-law however that could be done. And so I just prayed, and I didn't really get, of course, you don't really get any answers, but you do gain some strength. So flash forward, from that point, he was gone in a 3-month period. And so then comes a few funny stories, in the sense that it wasn't funny to tell my 6-year-old what happened, because you'd think we'd never told her in any shape or form that he was that sick. She really didn't grasp it. So that's a very, very bad, sad memory for me and my husband. The 4-year-old was like, oh, okay. She didn't get it. So the 2-year-old, she was there, but she's like, can I have some juice? Right. She's 2. So everything centered around initially the 6-year-old coping. So my first thought in sharing with everybody is where are your children in their ages, and not just ages, but ability to comprehend. And you're going to handle and help. It's so important to help each one individually, which takes a lot of freaking time, to spend time alone with each kid to walk them through it. So the oldest at 6 years old, for probably like the first 90 days, were really hard, to the point where the 4-year-old said, why is she crying again? And well, she's sad that Papa died. Really? And she didn't get it yet. But then at the I think 6-month mark is when the 4-year-old, pushing 5 by then, came to me and said, where's Pop-Up? How come he didn't come back? And then I was back to square one, explaining that he was sick and his heart stopped beating. And, oh, and with the oldest, it completely worked. He's in heaven. He's looking down on you. He loves you. You could feel the love in the house. And she loved all of that, which I still believe. The second one, I said the same thing. She goes, that's ridiculous. I want him here so I can hug him. None of that matters because I can't hug him. And so I had to pivot and said, you know what? You're right. This really stinks that you can't hug him. And I'd feel just like you do the way you. So yeah, we can feel a little angry that we can't hug him, but we can't change that. So we'll keep talking about it. And then we did, right? Okay. Flash forward about 6 more months and a whole year had gone by since he passed. And the now 3-year-old, who had been 2, looks at me one night when I'm putting her bed. She goes, where's Papa? When's he coming? I said, are you kidding me? To myself, I have to revisit this a whole year later. I thought I got through the worst, but it was in there. Negative memories live in little children. They just don't know what to do with them, right? And so it was coming forward. That missing was coming forward, and she had the ability, mind and verbal ability, to ask about it. So there we were, back to square one. But then part of that was Christmas time, just a couple months after he died. And the middle one, we didn't have a well-furnished house yet at all. There was the whole dining room was empty. And my middle daughter, the one that was like, yeah, this stinks, she started pulling toys from one room to that room. And then the next day there'd be something else. And they had little chairs. And the next thing, something else. And then all of a sudden I heard the oldest say, let's go to Sam's house. So they'd go into the other room and they'd go to Sam's house. And then they'd bring in something else, their little plastic toy dishes, and they'd pretend to have a meal at Sam's house. And then the little one started saying, because she was really verbal early, yeah, let's go to Sam's house. So I said, all right, something's going on here. Why does Sam have a house in the house? And then I realized it was palpable that their house had changed. They were making a new house to be like the old house. So for Christmas that year, I bought them little miniature everything you could think of for a house, a little washer dryer and a little couch and a little this, a little that. I embraced that they needed something different that we weren't able to maintain because of the grief in the house. And so they had Sam's house. And I said, my husband's like, this is ridiculous. Why are they doing it? And I said, they need it. Just step back. And I think they need it. So they had Sam's house for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months. And then Sam's house went away because the grieving in the house was also developing in a way that everybody was adjusting, I guess, right? My husband, who never had a crossword ever for his kids, most patient man on the planet, about 3, 4 months after his father died, he was like, the kids were annoying him, and I said, well, you can't take it out on them. They have no clue why suddenly dad's crabby. I get it. I said, so if you keep being crabby, I won't even let you around them. How could you say that to me? I'm grieving so much. And I don't know if he used that word, but I'm feeling so terrible. I said, feel as terrible as you want. Call me names, curse at me, do whatever you need to. They're too young to get it. And so just do that. So I wouldn't call myself a punching bag, but he embraced it, and he knew finally with me he could be miserable and show a side of himself that he never thought existed. So that was also helping the kids through it because they didn't have to adjust to what's wrong with dad, right? So he worked really hard at that. So flash forward, I did a lot of reading, as you can imagine, and said, okay, avoid the cemetery visits, but keep him alive at the dinner table. Keep him alive at the holidays. Keep a picture of him on the refrigerator for the rest of their lives. And don't shy away from answering the hard questions of why did he have to go, or what really was wrong with him. And so the conversation was a new one every year. I hate to break it to the listeners, but it's a perpetual, to this day, talking about how we all got through that time period and how we helped grandma get through it and how we made new memories with grandma so that we didn't make the new memories into bad memories. Like, in other words, we started she loved Atlantic City. So we all went to Atlantic City with her. So she had new memories, even though she was missing him on those trips, it was still new memories with the grandchildren, things like that, you know. So it never actually has ended, because now the girls are parents and we're grandparents, and now they're asking about their pop-up again. It's okay. We like that. But he died of a small oat cell lung cancer that, again, until he had symptoms all in here, his shoulder of all places, it had already metastasized. This was a man who went for regular physicals, but there was no indication, and he didn't smoke, and so on. Life happens, right? Now, there's always a silver lining and a beautiful thing. At least that's what I look for. We never had a babysitter outside of our family. And a friend of mine, I'm still friends with today, said, I need you to meet Jill. So I told my husband, we're going to invite Jill over because you need to go spend time with your father who's dying. No, we're not getting a different babysitter. Yes, we are. So I normally, wouldn't want to go against him during such a difficult time, but I knew he couldn't think. It's his father. He wasn't thinking as clearly as maybe he would. The grieving was already beginning. And so we didn't talk to each other for one whole night, because I dug my heels in, he dug his heels in, and then we did meet Jill right after it just turned out his father passed. And then he loved Jill, and Jill's still in our life all these years later, even though she's long not been a babysitter for us. She's in her 70s now. And she was a godsend to my husband, who was still the stay-at-home dad, who lost his support system and lost his parents. Basically, so much change at once. Now, my husband's a wonderful person, and he grew up kind of like one of those, if you had to have a stereotypical spoiled child, he was it. And he could get over on his mother all through his childhood, tell her whatever she wanted to hear, and she believed every word of it. But he still grew up good somehow, right? But he grew up a little selfish at times, because it was part of the atmosphere he grew up in. Well, it's like all the giving good things about my father-in-law when he passed landed in my husband after he died. And all of a sudden, my kids had an even better childhood than they ever did. And I had a better husband than I ever thought. I already thought I had a good one, but now I had this better one who actually talked about our feelings and wanted to hear what the girls had to say about everything. And it wasn't there before his father died. And so I couldn't believe, I said, okay, God, if this is what was meant to be, for my kids to have an even better childhood than they were already having, I guess I'll take it. And my husband got there when I first said that to him. He's kind of like, no. I said, well, maybe not, but you clearly respected your father and you embrace who he was, and you're bringing that to your children. And that he said, well, yeah, I'm trying. So yeah, it was, so the navigating them through is still going on, but to a much lesser degree. And it has to be individualized for each child, because they process, no matter what age they are, they still process grief and loss in a different way than they're individuals.
Yeah,
right?
so true. I love the comments you made about kind of keeping the memories alive. So you've got the photos, and in my case, when my first husband passed, I had a Christmas ornaments with our pictures on it, and I would hang. My daughter, who's grown and has kids of her own now, has that ornament on her tree, and so on. So
That's
those
beautiful.
various things where it's like, to ignore that this person was here is not happening, right? They were here. And I call those, what you described, I call them pockets of grief, those times when something else comes up. For example, when my daughter got married and her dad wasn't there, these types of things that come up, really is, or you do have to work with the kids and kind of say, hey, yeah, I understand that you're missing this or whatever. And I can totally relate to the whole talking to little kids too, because little kids they just don't understand the whole gone forever thing. And I'm glad that they don't. I mean, I want children to be,
We adults barely
I
grasp,
know,
it's,
yeah, and you want to keep kids from feeling pain, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, right? But then these things happen, and it's a natural part of life. And I just love this story about the kids all asking at different times and so on, because I think that's pretty darn, it can be exhausting as a parent. I can see that.
When I say, and I kept a sense of humor, like, really? I thought I was done with this part, and just
Yeah,
kept the sense of humor, but yeah, you do your best to,
yeah,
as a parent,
yeah.
to be there to answer the questions or even bring up. So I didn't always wait until it was brought up because sometimes all of us, right? We need to talk about something, but we don't know how to bring it forward. So sometimes I would, and I always give the funny example of my husband. So he's not verbally effusive. It's never been his way. He's a show, not a say. And so I joke. I have a friend who says, "Well, your husband's a man of few words," and I'm always ask my husband why he doesn't always say "I love you" and this and that. I said, "Well," I said to my husband one day, "You can't live without me," and his answer was, "So." And that's all I needed. And that's him. It doesn't come easily. And my middle daughter's the same way. It's really hard for her to bring forth the words like that. But she will show you in a million different ways. Now she's married and she's a mom, a million different ways how much she cares and wants and cares about people's well being and things like that. It's just, we're all different.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to kids, little kids especially, that it's very important to try to explain things to them in a way that they can understand. It doesn't scare them.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Mhm.
feel like you've just stopped talking. Because then if you don't talk about it, then you have this atmosphere of we can't talk about it or it's something bad.
Right. The big secret or
Just
something. Yeah.
never, that's just going to fester, and that's never going to be a good thing either. So
Mm.
I'm impressed with the way you handled that. But if you had anything that you would do differently, I mean, especially when they were so little, um,
Mhm.
can you think of anything that you would say to someone who's in your shoes and they've got littles and try to explain to them that, Papa's not going to be here anymore or anything
Mm.
like that? Any thought comes to mind?
Yeah, you take everything day by day, and then you look back and you say, yeah, what could have helped more? And I think it was when he was in the throes of dying that I couldn't leave my husband, who was with his father and his mother, or I felt like I shouldn't at that point. My sister took the kids, the girls, and so I did talk to two out of three on the phone. You're going to sleep at Aunt Chrissy's tonight, and the 2-year-old really didn't get it. And where's mom? And she was a nightmare to get to sleep. Well, actually, the 4-year-old was worse than the 2-year-old. She says, "I'm not going to bed," she told my sister. And because she was just, where are my parents? And I never sleep at Aunt Chrissy's. Why? Yeah. So I think I would have gone to the girls sooner. I stayed overnight, and then in around 8 in the morning, I left to because the girls needed to see their mother. I knew that innately. And so I went to my sister's and was with the girls. And then my husband called and he said, he's gone. And I'm like, he's coming. I was supposed to be there. In my own head, I'm thinking, oh, I said, okay, he's gone. He's at peace. And how are you doing? He's like, well, I'm glad he's at peace. Okay. So I thought to myself, well, gosh, is it one of those moments where the person dying knows they can let go or want to let go? Because he couldn't speak, but we believed he could hear. And of course, I told him, where I was going. And so his grandchildren were with their mother, and he was with his wife and son, and his niece, who was like a daughter, was there. Everybody that he loved the most was safe and okay. And so I've always felt, did he let go at that time because he felt the peace of it? I guess if I get to meet him again someday, I will,
Yes.
find out. Yeah, find out. My long list of questions for people. So yes, but I wish that to help the girls more, I wish I had gone to them sooner so there was less mystery for them.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing we would do differently. Because they probably definitely needed me more than he did at that moment.
Oh, that's a good point. That's actually a really good point, right? And
Yeah,
yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. So yeah.
yeah.
Well, do
So
you have anything else you want to tell our listeners about the whole navigating kids through the loss of a grandparent? I'm admiring how you did it because I think you did a great
oh,
job.
Well, you read a lot, and and I always say, talk to my girls. They'll tell you if I really screwed it up or not. I can tell it one way. They might, tell it another, but um, no, I don't have anything to add. Just always remember how fragile your kids are at every age, because what I'm learning as a mom of these three grown women is that even though my husband and I both have done our best to raise them to be these independent women who know how to make good decisions, that they still need their support system, and they need their friends, they need their mom and dad, they
Mhm.
need, important people in their, they need the village.
Yes.
And as they grow into their mid and late 20s, and one will be 30 this year, um, I encourage them to have friends of women that are my age or my ilk or my time frame, because I don't live right next to two out of three. And it's okay to have those relationships. So my youngest does have someone on Long Island, and I have yet to meet her. Her name is Loretta. I can't wait to meet her. And she met her because my daughter was her son's home health aide right through to his death last year. So they are forever bonded, because they brought Susanna to the hospital to take care of him while they went to shower and come back. And there's a lot to that story, but they're bonded forever, Loretta. So my daughter, in many ways, is the daughter that Loretta, it just didn't happen in Loretta's life. And I'm grateful for that. Not some might feel differently, but they have each other.
Yeah.
And she brings spirituality into my daughter's life, which I'm grateful for as well. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just,
Place there for a reason. I happen to believe that things happen for a reason, and the way things aren't really, people are brought into our lives to help us at times when we need help, and I think that's important to recognize that, to recognize them and not push them away, and so on. It's always a good
yeah.
one. So yeah, and
I'll
also,
tell you a quick story also, is when a close friend passed away, and her mother found it hard to talk to me after a while. That happened to me when I was 9 years old. So God was getting me, or somebody was getting me ready. Then a neighborhood girl died of a brain tumor, and she was 9 years old. And the mother couldn't talk to me. She never talked to me again. And even at 9, my mother must have tried to explain it, that it was too painful for our neighbor. So I got it. I never felt bad that that neighbor didn't talk to me. But then you flash forward, and by the time I got married and had kids, she called my mother and she said, "Do you think she would send me a Christmas card and with pictures of her kids?" And that she was ready to. And I do get choked up about that very quickly. She's 92 now, still in touch. And of course, I said yes. Why would I not? Meet them where they are, right? It's
yep,
hard on everybody.
it takes people different times to process, and there's no
Yeah,
right or wrong way to do this. It's
exactly.
just, we are all human, so how do we get through that? But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that part about that. But well, I want to thank you again for your time today. It's been wonderful chatting with you. Thank you for your stories, and yeah, thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Christine. I'm spiritual. You're doing God's work, bringing this
Thank you.
to all your listeners to help them through some of their most poignant and difficult times in their lives. And your openness is what makes the difference, I'm sure. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.